Hey, this is Mr. Janes. In this video, we'll be naming some geometric figures and learning some vocabulary terms that we haven't yet covered. So really some odds and ends. Before we start, what I'd like you to do now is pause and predict. Go ahead, pause the video here, and try and fill in any of these blanks that you think you might know, the vocabulary terms that they're associated with. If you know what... Hey, this is Mr. Janes. In this video, we'll be naming some geometric figures and some vocabulary terms that we haven't yet covered yet. Before we start, what I'd like you to do is pause the video here and predict by reading these descriptions, these definitions you could say, and trying to fill in the vocabulary terms if you know what they are. If you're not sure, don't worry. Just go ahead and read through these and see if you know what any of these terms are going to be. Maybe you've heard them before in other classes, or maybe not. It's okay. Just go ahead, try and pause and predict. Pause the video now. All right. Now that hopefully you've tried and you've read these definitions, let's go ahead and fill these in together. Lines that do not intersect. Those will be parallel lines. P-A-R-A-L-L-E-L. Parallel lines. And lines that intersect at a 90-degree angle, those are perpendicular lines. Perpendicular. So let's draw some right here to get an example. So parallel lines. There's one line. There's another line. Now, whenever we draw a line, we should have at least 2 points on it, so we'll fill those in right now. Call this A and B, and we'll call this C and point D. Right? There are a few ways that we notate that two lines are parallel. The first way we do this is if two lines appear to be parallel, we're always going to add these little arrows somewhere on them. Could be 2 arrows, could be 3 arrows, but as long as they match the number of arrows, to show that these two lines are parallel to each other. So these little arrows are important. Next, if we were going to write a paragraph about these two lines being parallel, maybe put this in a sentence, here's what symbols we would use. We would write down line AB with the arrows over it, of course, since it's a line. We would write down line CD, again with the arrows over it, because it is a line. And this is the symbol for parallel. It's just 2 lines straight up and down like that. So this reads that line AB is parallel to, line CD, and it's a line because it's got the arrow on top. We could also say if these were maybe special lines, maybe this would be, could call this L and this could be M, then we could write that L is parallel to M. Okay? Again, we're using the sign to show that they're parallel, and we're just writing the first line right here with L and the second line with M. So whether you use 2 points like this, or you choose to use just the one letter for special lines, this is the symbol that means parallel. Now what about perpendicular lines? Now these are lines that intersect at that 90-degree angle or a right angle. So let's go ahead and draw an example of some perpendicular lines right here. And again, if we're talking about lines, we've got to have at least 2 points on them. So we'll call this A, B, point C, and point D. And so how can we label that 2 lines are perpendicular? Well, on a figure, for parallel, we add these little arrows, but for perpendicular, we're going to add this little square right here to show that that's a 90-degree angle. Now, what if we were talking about this in a sentence or in a paragraph and we had to use some symbols down here? Here's what we would do. Let's start with this line, AC. Okay, arrow on top, on both sides because it's a line. I'll start with DB next. Here's DB. And instead of putting these parallel symbol in between, we're going to put this symbol. It's kind of like an upside down T, and it means perpendicular. So this means is perpendicular. So this reads AC, line AC, is perpendicular to, that's the upside down T, line DB, again because it's got the arrows on top. Again, you could use one cursive letter. Let's call this maybe N, and we'll call this maybe W. And so you could say that N is perpendicular to W, if those are kind of special lines with the cursive letters on the end. Either way, this upside down T symbol means perpendicular. All right, next up, let's talk about maybe two figures that are exactly the same. We would call those figures congruent. Congruent. Now, we look at congruence, or we notate it two different ways. If we're looking at these two segments here, and we're saying they're the exact same figure, the exact same shape, we could basically take this one and drag it on top of that one, and they would fit perfectly. We would say these two figures are congruent. To show that, we may put one little tick mark on both of them. Maybe we'd put 2. But as long as they have the same number of tick marks, that shows that they are congruent. And here's how we write that two things are congruent. We use this symbol right here. So this says that segment AB, again it's a segment because it's got the line on top with no arrows, is congruent to, that symbol means congruent, segment CD. And that means that they're basically the same figure in shape and size. So same shape and size we can think of for now. Sometimes we'll look more at the measurement. So instead of looking at, let's go ahead and practice using this congruence notation. What can we say about these two triangles? Well, I'll write one thing and I'll let you write something else. So I notice that AB has one little tick mark on it, and XY also has one tick mark on it, which must mean that those two segments are the same length. So I'll write that segment AB is congruent to segment XY. Pause the video here and see if you can figure out one other thing we can say about these two triangles. Make sure you pause the video. The answers will be up in 3, 2, 1. All right, and here we are. So we can say that we've got segment AC is congruent to segment XZ, and right here is how you'd write that. AC, make sure you got the line over it, the congruence symbol, and segment XZ. Before we flip to the other side, we've got 3 additional vocabulary terms. Let's just bang out right now. Must be on the same line. Now this is one that's kind of a word that you've heard before, but it's got a different meaning, or more specific meaning in geometry. Between. Let's say I've got point A here, and here's point B. And I tell you that I'm going to put C between A and B. That's what I'm going to do, put C between A and B. Can I put C up here? No, I cannot. The word between in geometry means anywhere in between A and B, but it must be on the same line, so C cannot be there. Nope. I could put C over here. Could put C right in the middle. C could go here as well. Could I put C over here? Couldn't do that, right? Because it is not between. So it's got to be between A and B and on the same line. Very important. 2 additional words that are kind of fun. A point that divides a segment into 2 congruent segments. That's going to be called the midpoint. Midpoint. Okay? And so if I draw, here's A, here's B, and here is my segment. The midpoint, I'll call it C, chops this segment into 2 congruent segments, which means it is exactly in the middle. So I can mark that those 2 halves are both equal. Maybe one is 3 centimeters, and the other one is 3 centimeters as well. So the midpoint is right in the middle. And I guess that makes sense. I mean, midpoint, middle point, right? Kind of makes sense. So it's in the middle point. You can think of it that way. And lastly, my favorite word in geometry, a line that divides a segment into 2 congruent segments is called a bisector. A bisector. So here's an example. Say you've got point A, got point B. Okay, there's my line. All right, here's point C. And again, C is right in the middle. It's the midpoint. Now the bisector is going to be the line that comes in here, boom, and cuts it in half. So the bisector is actually this line right here. Okay? You can think of it bi, like bicycle, means 2, and sector means to cut. So this literally means to cut in 2. So bisector, cut in 2, right? It's a line that cuts that segment right in two, goes to the midpoint right there. Now, everything we did with segments and congruence also works for angles. So two angles are congruent if they've got the same angle measure. So let's see these two angles right here. They are the same shape, we could say, same shape and same size. Okay, and so to show that, what we're going to do is put a little arc right here in both of them. Put one in both of them. We can even put two in both of them. But they've got to have matching arcs, and that means that they're congruent. They got the same shape, the same size, the same angle measure. And right here is how we notate it. Just like before, we use the congruent symbol. Okay, we've got angle ABC. Again, we've got ABC because B is our vertex. Is congruent to, there's the symbol, angle XYZ. Okay, so this congruent symbol is the same as it was before with segments. Sometimes, though, we're not talking about the shape of the angle. We're talking about the actual measurement. Just like before, talking about measurement or number. And so you can see right here, these are both 50-degree angles. So we know that they are the same angle measurement, both 50 degrees. We're going to use this notation instead. We're going to use the equal sign, and we're going to put a little m in front of the angle. This means the measure, okay, the measure of angle ABC is equal to the measure of angle XYZ. So again, this congruent symbol is for talking about kind of the shape of these two angles. You could take one and just put it around top of the other one. They'd be exactly the same. And this equal sign is when we're talking about more of the measurement, or the how big the angle actually is, 50 degrees. Just like before, let's actually practice using this. So we've got these two triangles here, and I'll find one thing we could write down about these two triangles, and you'll find the second thing. So the first thing you notice is that, look at this, both angle A and that angle X right there have two tick marks. So I could say that angle, let's see, BAC is congruent to angle YXZ. Pause the video here and see if you can figure out the other thing that you see on these triangles. Pause the video. The answers will be coming up in 3, 2, 1. All right, so you can notice these two angles with the one little arc right here. We have that angle ABC over here is congruent to angle XYZ. And we've notated it right there. So just like before with segments, we talked about betweenness. We've also got a word to talk about with angles. So let's say I've got an angle right here. Okay. This area right here is called the interior of the angle. Anywhere between these two rays is the interior. And everywhere outside of those two rays is called the exterior, just like with a house. The inside of a house is called the interior. The outside of the house, anywhere outside of those rays, is called the exterior. So a quick example, right? If we've got maybe this angle right here, if I want to draw a point on the interior, that could be point A. A point on the exterior would be something like point B, and a point on the angle would be point C, because it's right on one of those rays. And again, here's our vertex right there. So we've got the interior, the exterior, on the angle, and the vertex right there. One last word. A ray that divides an angle into two congruent angles. We've actually already seen this word. Can you remember what it could be? Here's our angle right there, and we take a ray and boom, cut that angle right in half, so that this angle and this angle are congruent. So maybe if this one was originally an 80-degree angle, now we've got a 40-degree angle and a 40-degree angle. What's that called when we cut a segment right in half? That's right, that is a bisector, and it's the same word for angles, an angle bisector. Hopefully you've understood all the vocabulary terms we talked about in this video. Make sure you've taken good notes. If you're confused, either rewind or see me before next class, because there will be a video check. See you then.